Hey guys, it's Miss Landry, and here is the video for Mod 4, which is about why psychology is so important to study. And it comes down to the fact that humans are pretty wacky. We really are. We're kind of weird, which makes us really interesting to study. But let's take a look at why psychology is so important to study. Your key terms, definitely hindsight bias. We're going to go into overconfidence. We're going to talk about random events and how humans tend to see order in places and patterns where there aren't any. So, we're going to talk about all that stuff. It's kind of cool. So, here we go. Let's first talk about hindsight bias. This is, I think, also known as something called I knew it all along. And it has to do with the fact that we tend to once an event has occurred, we believe that we knew that it was going to happen. And it's just not the case. And you see it not only in funny things like sports, but you also see it in some sadder things like there's a lot of hindsight bias in 9/11 where people are like, oh, we knew that was going to happen at some point. Or like school shootings, like, when they're like, oh, was there a red flag anywhere? So, be really careful about hindsight bias. There's three types of hindsight bias. So the first one is what we call memory distortion. And this is when after an event has happened, you might say to someone, like, I told you that was going to happen when you actually didn't tell anyone because you did not actually know it was going to happen. So you're basically distorting your own memory of the event and what happened before the event. The second one is what we call inevitability. Like it's inevitable that it was going to happen or that it was bound to happen. I see this one a lot with natural disasters and attacks and things like that. People will always say, like, oh, that was, we were just waiting for that. I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner. So it's easy to say that after an event has occurred, but nobody says it before because predicting the future is very, very difficult. And then we also have something called foreseeability, which is what I just said. You really cannot predict the future. I just had a feeling that was going to happen. It's easy to say that after the event has occurred. Now, I'm going to show you an example of hindsight bias. So let me clear the screen. And here is an example, a great example of hindsight bias. You actually see a lot of hindsight bias in the stock market. So this is Netflix. This is the stock price for Netflix. And if you look at the bottom, here we have the months and the year. So notice that back in 2012, we'll go, where's 2012? Right about here. It was selling for about $53 a share. And this is a person talking about it. And they said, looking at the price today, so, I'm not sure when this was put out. It was 264.58. So think about how much money someone could have made if they could have predicted this. Most people, once that stock rises, they're like, oh, I knew I should have bought it. And yet you didn't, right? And so that is hindsight bias. Like it's really easy to say, oh, I knew I should have after it's occurred, after that stock price has gone up. If you truly believed that you should have bought it, then you would have bought it. But basically, if you had invested 10,000, you would have made about 50,000. And this happens all the time in the stock market. We just believe that we knew, but we only believe that after the event has occurred. So hindsight, it's that old saying of hindsight 2020. So, okay. Overconfidence is kind of cool. How do I want to say this? We humans tend to think we know a lot more than we actually do. So I actually find it really refreshing when people say they don't know. It's almost like we're afraid to say we don't know something. And so this overconfidence, it's not only in our knowledge, but also in our judgments, like the decisions that we make. We truly believe that we're making these for the right decision, for the right reasons. So overconfidence can occur because of two different things. So the first one is in processing the information that we have when we have to make a decision. The first thing that we do is we actually, when we're trying to make a decision, let's say I ask you a question about two cities, and I say, which of these two cities has the highest population? The first thing you're going to do is your mind is going to start pulling facts that it knows or information. It may not be true fact. And you kind of have an idea of what you think the answer is. And what information comes to mind first will be confirming information, meaning it will confirm what you think. The disconfirming, or the things that go against what you think, are pretty far back, and you tend not to pull those out as easily. You also really want to be correct. And there's lots of reasons for this. Maybe you want to look smart. Maybe you're trying to win an argument. Who knows? But these two things are why we start to feel really overconfident in our answers. Another reason you have overconfidence is because of effects and judgmental error. This one's really interesting. So when you have a question, you often have cues in the question about like how to make a decision. So for example, in the question about the two cities, you might say to yourself, well, which one has a bigger airport? Because the bigger airport can tend to indicate a higher population. The confidence that you have in your answer is not in your answer. The confidence you have is in the cue that you're coming up with, which it's interesting, but there's been a lot of research, and the harder the question is, usually the cue actually leads you in the wrong direction. So I think that's kind of interesting. But that's overconfidence. So just be aware that we do tend to do that. I see it a lot in students when they say like, oh yeah, I'm totally ready for this test. And they're not. But that is an example of overconfidence. Okay, so last thing is perceiving order in random events. So humans really love order. It's how we understand our world. We cannot look at something in random without wanting to find a way to put it together that makes sense to us. So I have some pictures here. Let me highlight. So here you can see some clouds. And I know immediately if I said to you, what does this look like? Everybody will say a heart. And sure enough, that's us making sense of it. Here's a tree. Do you see a nice little face in there? There isn't a face in there. It is just that we make order out of it so that we can understand it. I don't know if you can see this piece of toast here. You probably hear a lot. People see Jesus in their toast, or like a shape of a Cheeto. Here is a piece of toast that has the face of Michael Jackson. I don't know if you can see it, but yeah. And then, oops, sorry. And then, of course, we see it in the stars, right? We're always trying to find shapes out of things. So we have the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper. The truth is those shapes are not there. Those stars are so distant from each other, they don't make a shape, but we need to see it. I'm going to show you a really quick video. This will take about 30 seconds. This is called murmuration, and it's what birds do. So let's watch this. So you can see that even in that video, the person who was doing it was like, oh my gosh, it's a bird. They made a bird. They didn't make a bird. It is where you're standing. It might look to you like a bird, but it is not a bird. It is birds flying, and we are trying to make sense of it. So, okay, last thing, let's try this question. I'm not going to ask you to answer it right now. I want you to think about this question. This is something that students are really interested in. What do you think is the correct answer to this question? So make sure you write down an answer to share in class and have a reason for it. Pause the video if you need to, but that's it for this video. Thanks, guys.